Hare Krishna, everybody. Welcome back to the live studios here at Wisteria Cottage. And we've got the cream of the crop here. We've got Gaurasundra Kripamoya from Hungary and his better half, Adi Shakti Devi Dasi. And we have Priya Kund, and his better half, Shamagori, the best cook in the world. And they're running their, preaching center here in their shop and doing so many things, making devotees. We have Matthew Bell Roberts, who's traveling with me and who's the techie. He's doing all kinds of things. So we got the cream of the crop, cream of the cream, and we're going to hear the Srimad-Bhagavatam together tonight. We welcome all of you out in cyberspace. I talked today to Prafulla Mukhi, my disciple, who's a 70-year-old lady, English lady, who became a devotee in 1990, maybe even 89, in Soul Street when I was doing the question and answer sessions. And you never could imagine she's a devotee by seeing her on the street, but she is. And she got very sick last year, actually, but now she's better. But she's still reading every day. She's watching us, maybe, right now. So, Prafulla Mukhi, Hare Krishna. She's much better this year. And she's watching every day, and she's addicted. She told me it's addictive. So, it made me very happy. And she's not feeling as much separation as before, because she can watch every day. When she went to Vrindavan, when she came back on the first time, and on the flight, she cried the whole way. She couldn't tolerate the separation from Vrindavan. So devotees are everywhere. And you don't know. Tomorrow we're going to have Balanuja for lunch. It's Jodi from Scunthorpe, right on the border between Scotland and the north. And he's also a retired educator with a PhD in administration of education, and runs an international journal of education for 30 years. And we met him in the same way, Soul Street. Question and answer session. 25 years later, we initiated him. Now he's reading Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, all the books. He reads it straight through, cover to cover. Chanted 16 rounds. And he's coming over tomorrow all the way down from Scunthorpe. Krishna's everywhere. Krishna's devotees are everywhere. And Lord Chaitanya's coming and picking him up. And here we are with a room full of pure devotees. I mean, how lucky is that? Hare Krishna. Okay. We've reached the 4th chapter of the 3rd canto. And it's called, the 4th canto is called Vidura meets Maitreya. So now we heard how Vidura met Uddhava, and he was traveling, Vidura, on pilgrimage, and he didn't know about the results of the Battle of Kurukshetra, and he didn't know about Krishna leaving, and the Yadu dynasty all leaving. So he asked Uddhava how everybody was, and Uddhava went into trance, couldn't speak, and he started remembering Krishna's pastimes, and then he finally started to speak, and he just remembered one pastime after another. It was complete nectar. Now Vidura is going to meet Maitreya, and what's going to happen is Krishna, when he left, and he talked to Uddhava, Maitreya happened to come along. So Maitreya heard Krishna's instructions to Uddhava, so he knew everything. So now Vidura is going to meet Maitreya, and because Maitreya and Vidura asks Uddhava to initiate him, and Uddhava has already been instructed by Krishna, no, Vidura should take initiation from Maitreya because he's older than him. Even though Uddhava was the most qualified, but age had something to do with it also. So now we're going to hear how Vidura met Maitreya and what Vidura inquired from Maitreya And this is practically the whole third canto, rest of the third canto. Okay, before we launch into that pastime, we're going to hear Srimad-Bhagavatam Mahima Stotram as we do every day. Hopefully the devotees are getting something from this and meditating deeper and deeper on what the Srimad-Bhagavatam actually is. Sanatana Goswami says, Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha, Sarva Vedaika Satpala, Sarva Siddhanta Ratnaja, Sarva Lokaika Drik Prada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana, Srimad Bhagavata Prabhu, Kalidvan Dotitaditya, Sri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master, Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya, Prema Varshak Shadayate, Sarvada Sarvasevyaya, Sri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin, Madguro Mad Mahadana, Mad Nistadaga Mad Bhagya, Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu, sadutadayin, adini chuchatakara, hanamunchagadachin mam, premnarit kantayospura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 4, Vidura approaches Maitreya, Text 1. Thereafter, all of them, the descendants of Vrishni and Bhoja, being permitted by the Brahmanas, partook of the remnants of prasadam and also drank liquor made of rice. By drinking, they all became delirious, and, bereft of knowledge, they touched the cores of each other's hearts with harsh words. Purport. In ceremonies, when Brahmanas and Vaishnavas are sumptuously fed, the host partakes of the remnants of foodstuff after the guest has given permission. So the descendants of Vrishni and Bhoja formally took permission from the Brahmanas and ate the prepared foodstuff. Kshatriyas are permitted to drink at certain occasions. So they all drank a kind of light liquor made of rice. By such drinking they became delirious and bereft of sense, so much so that they forgot their relationship with one another and used harsh words which touched the cores of each other's hearts. Drinking is so harmful that even such a highly cultured family can be affected by intoxication and forget themselves in a drunken state. The descendants of Vrishni and Bhoja were not expected to forget themselves in this way, but by the will of the Supreme it happened, and thus they became harsh towards one another. Text 2. As by the friction of bamboos destruction takes place, so also at sunset, by the interaction of the faults of intoxication, all their minds became unbalanced and destruction took place. Purport. When there's a need of fire in the forest, by the will of the Supreme, it takes place due to friction among bamboos. Similarly, the descendants of the Yadu were all destroyed by the will of the Lord by the process of self-destruction. Just as there is no possibility of a fire occupying deep in the forest due to human effort, so also there was no power in the universe which could vanquish the descendants of Yadu, who were protected by the Lord. The Lord wanted them to be so destroyed, and thus they obeyed his order, as indicated by the word tad anugyata. Just a little side light, anecdotal story. When it came time for Krishna to kill Jarasandha, he came back from Hastinapur, and Yudhishthira wanted to perform the Rajasuya sacrifice. This was before the Battle of Kurukshetra. So he performed the Rajasuya sacrifice before the Battle of Kurukshetra, before he was given the formal seat after the battle. This is what really fired Duryodhana up, because he was seeing all this opulence and he was feeling really threatened, you know. So anyway, so Krishna came down and back to Dwarka, and at the time, the Yadus were contemplating how they could kill Jarasandha. And what they wanted to do was just to go in there with an army and just wipe out the whole situation, wipe everybody out, including him. So Krishna, he knew what he wanted to do. So he asked Uddhava. And then Uddhava gave this brilliant plan. Why don't you just kill Jarasandha, and that way we can have the Rajasuya sacrifice nicely without this whole melee, you know? And then he thought the plan that Bhima and Krishna and Arjuna would go there, you know, disguised as brahmanas and beg charity from Jarasandha, and then beg a fight, and then just kill Jarasandha without killing anyone else. And that way the Rajasuya sacrifice should go on, because he was the only one that didn't submit to the challenge horse that was sent out by Yudhishthira. So Krishna thought, you know, this Yadu dynasty, they're pretty, like, nobody can defeat them. And when I leave, what happens if they're still here and they get fired up to do things like this, and then it'll be the biggest burden on the earth. And that's why he decided, according to Vishwanath and I believe it was Jiva Goswami, maybe even Sanatana Goswami. So that's background of that pastime, why Krishna decided to annihilate the Yadu dynasty. And also he wanted to take them back with him. That was the main reason. Okay. The personality of Godhead, text 3. The personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, after foreseeing the end of his family by his internal potency, went to the bank of the river Saraswati, sipped water, and sat down underneath a tree. Purport. All the above-mentioned activities of the Yadus and Bhojas were executed by the internal potency of the Lord, because he wanted them to be dispatched to their respective abodes after he had finished his mission of descent. They were all his sons and grandsons, and were given complete protection by the paternal affection of the Lord. How they could be vanquished in the presence of the Lord is answered in this verse. Everything was done by the Lord himself. Swatma Mayaya. The Lord's family members were either incarnations of his plenary expansions or demigods from the heavenly planets. And thus, before his departure, he separated them by his internal potency. Before being dispatched to their respective abodes, they were sent to the holy place of Prabhas, where they performed pious activities and took food and drink to their heart's content. It was then arranged for them to be sent back to their abodes so that others could see that the powerful Yadu dynasty was no longer in the world. In a previous verse, the word anugyata, indicating that the whole sequence of events was arranged by the Lord, is significant. These particular pastimes of the Lord are not a manifestation of his external energy or material nature. Such an exhibition of his internal potency is eternal, and therefore one should not conclude that the Yadus and Bhojas died in a drunken state in an ordinary fratricidal war. Sri Jiva Goswami comments, so it was Jiva Goswami, on these incidents as magical performances. In other words, it was a projection by Krishna. He projected the whole event. It was like a theater, like a drama performed by Krishna, by his internal potency. Text 4. The Lord is the vanquisher of the distresses of one who is surrendered unto him. Thus, he who desired to destroy his family told me previously to go to Badrika Ashram. This is Uddhava speaking. Purport. While at Dwarka, Uddhava was warned to avoid the distresses which were to follow the disappearance of the Lord and the destruction of the Yadu dynasty. He was advised to proceed to Badrika Ashram because there he could associate with the devotees of Narayana, and in their association of devotional service increase his eagerness for chanting, hearing, knowledge, and detachment. Text 5. Yet in spite of my knowing his desire to destroy the dynasty, O Arindama, Vidura, I followed him because it was impossible for me to bear separation from the lotus feet of the Master. So see, this is the picture. Krishna instructed Uddhava in Dwarka. That was the Uddhava Gita. Then he went to this place, solitary place, and he told Uddhava in Dwarka to go to Badrika Ashram. But he couldn't tolerate the separation, so he turned back from his journey to Badrika Ashram and followed Krishna. And then they met in this solitary place. Text 6. Thus following, I saw my patron and master, Lord Sri Krishna, sitting alone and deeply thinking, taking shelter of the bank of the river Saraswati, although he is the shelter of the goddess of fortune. Purport. Those who are in the renounced order of life often take shelter under a tree or a wisteria plant. The Lord was found by Uddhava in that condition of taking shelter, as do persons who have no shelter. Because he is the proprietor of everything, everywhere is his shelter, and everywhere is under his shelter. I'll read this again, this is too sweet. Those who are in the renounced order of life often take shelter underneath a tree. The Lord was found by Uddhava in that condition of taking shelter under a tree, as do persons who have no shelter. Because he is the proprietor of everyone, of everything, everywhere is his shelter, and everywhere is under his shelter. The entire material and spiritual cosmic manifestation is sustained by him, and therefore he is the shelter of everything. So there was nothing astonishing in his taking shelter in the way of the unsheltered who were in the renounced order of life. Text 7. The Lord's body is blackish, but is eternal, full of bliss and knowledge, and very, very beautiful. His eyes are always peaceful, and they are reddish like the rising morning sun. I could immediately recognize him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead by his 4 hands, different symbolic representations, and yellow silk garments. The Lord was sitting, taking rest under a young banyan tree, with his right lotus foot on his left thigh, and although he had left all household comforts, he looked quite cheerful in that position. Purport. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the Lord's sitting posture, keeping his back against the newly grown banyan tree, is also meaningful. The Ashwatha banyan tree is so called because the tree does not die very quickly. It continues to live for many, many years. The Lord's legs and their energies are all material ingredients, which are all five in all: earth, water, fire, air, and sky. The material energies represented by the banyan tree are all products of his external potency, and therefore are kept to his back. And because this particular universe is the smallest of all, the banyan tree is therefore designated as small, or as a child. Chakta Pipalam indicates that he had now finished his pastimes in this particular small universe. But since the Lord is absolute and eternally blissful, there is no difference between his leaving or accepting something. The Lord was now prepared to leave this particular universe and go into another. Just as the sun rises on one particular part of a planet and sets on another part, but does not change its own situation. Text 9. At that time, after traveling in many parts of the world, Maitreya, a great devotee of the Lord and a friend and well-wisher of the great sage Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa, reached that spot out of his own perfect accord. Purport. Maitreya was one of the disciples of Maharshi Parashara, the father of Vyasadeva. Thus Vyasadeva and Maitreya were friends and mutual well-wishers. By some fortunate accident, Maitreya reached the place where Lord Sri Krishna was resting. To meet the Lord is not an ordinary incident. Maitreya was a great sage and a learned scholar, philosopher, but not a pure devotee of the Lord. And therefore his meeting with the Lord at that time may have been due to agyata sukriti, or some unknown devotional service. Pure devotees always engage in pure devotional activities, and therefore their meeting with the Lord is natural. But when those who are not up to that standard meet the Lord, it is due to the unforeseen fortune of accidental devotional service. Text 10. Maitreya Muni was greatly attached to him, the Lord, and he was listening in a pleasing attitude with his shoulder lowered. With a smile and particular glance upon me, having allowed me to rest, the Lord spoke as follows. Purport. Although both Uddhava and Maitreya were great souls, the Lord's attention was more on Uddhava, because he was a spotlessly pure devotee. A Jnanabhakta, or one whose devotion is mixed with the monistic viewpoint, is not a pure devotee. Although Maitreya was a devotee, his devotion was mixed. The Lord reciprocates with his devotees on the basis of transcendental love, and not on the basis of philosophical knowledge or fruitive activities. In the transcendental loving service of the Lord, there is no place for monistic knowledge or fruitive activities. The gopis in Vrindavan were neither highly learned scholars nor mystic yogis. They had spontaneous love for the Lord, and thus he became their heart and soul. And the gopis also became the heart and soul of the Lord. Lord Chaitanya approved the relationship of the gopis with the Lord as supreme. Herein the Lord's attitude towards Uddhava was more intimate than towards Maitreya Muni. Text 11. O Vasu, I know from within your mind what you desired in the days of yore, when the Vasus and other demigods responsible for expanding the universal affairs performed sacrifices. You particularly desired to achieve my association. This is very difficult to obtain for others, but I award it unto you. Purport. Uddhava is one of the eternal associates of the Lord, and a plenary portion of Uddhava was one of the 8 Vasus, in the days of yore. The 8 Vasus and the demigods in the upper planetary system, who were responsible for the management of the universal affairs, performed a sacrifice in the days of yore, desiring to fulfill their respective ultimate goals in life. At that time, an expansion of Uddhava, acting as one of the Vasus, desired to become an associate of the Lord. The Lord knew this because he is present in the heart of every living entity as Paramatma, the super consciousness. In everyone's heart, there is the representation of super consciousness, who gives memory to the partial consciousness of every living entity. The living entity, as partial consciousness, forgets incidents of his past life, but the superconsciousness reminds him how to act in terms of his past cultivation of knowledge. The Bhagavad Gita confirms this in fact in various ways. Yayatam mam prapadyante tangs tataiva pajamyaham sarvasya chaham riddhi sanavishto matak smritir jnanam apavanam cha. Everyone is at liberty to desire as he likes, but the desire is fulfilled by the Supreme Lord. Everyone is independent to think or desire, but the fulfillment of one's desire depends on the Supreme Will. This law is expressed as man proposes, God disposes. In the days of yore, when the demigods and Vasus performed sacrifice, Uddhava, as one of the Vasus, desired to enter into the association of the Lord, which is very difficult for those busy in empiric philosophical speculation or fruitive activities. Such persons have practically no information of the facts about how becoming an associate of the Lord, about becoming an associate of the Lord. Only the pure devotees can know, by the mercy of the Lord, that the personal association of the Lord is the highest perfection of life. The Lord assured Uddhava that he would fulfill his desire. It appears that when the Lord informed him by his indication to Uddhava, the great sage Maitreya finally became aware of the importance of entering into the association of the Lord. So Maitreya became a pure devotee, in other words, by this conversation. He just listening, because he was listening to Krishna, instruct Uddhava. Text 12. O Uddhava, in the lotus millennium, in the days of yore, at the beginning of the creation, I spoke to Brahma, who was situated on the lotus that grows out of my navel, about my transcendental glories, which the great sages describe as Srimad-Bhagavatam. This is the proof that the Bhagavatam is Shruti, another evidence. And it's given also in the Tattva Sandarbha by Jiva Goswami. Purport. When a person is fully conversant with knowledge of the Lord, as far as can be known by a perfect living entity in the liberated state, he is allowed to enter into the spiritual sky, where the Vaikuntha planets exist. The Lord was sitting in a lonely place, just about to disappear from the vision of the inhabitants of this universe. And Uddhava was fortunate to see him even at that time, and thus receive the Lord's permission to enter Vaikuntha. The Lord is everywhere, at all times, and his appearance and disappearance are merely the experience of the inhabitants of a particular universe. He is just like the sun. The sun does not appear or disappear in the sky. It is only in the experience of men that in the morning the sun rises, and in the evening the sun sets. The Lord is simultaneously both in Vaikuntha and everywhere, within and without Vaikuntha. Text 13. O Uddhava, in the lotus millennium, in the days of yore, at the beginning of the creation, I spoke unto Brahma, who is situated on the lotus that grows out of my navel, I just said that, didn't I? I just pushed the wrong button and I went up instead of down.
No, I
Oh.
went down too.
Oh, it's the same.
Yeah.
Is it repeated twice?
No.
It's slightly different? Wait a second. Oh, Udave, it's the same exact verse.
But I think it's a mistake because I have another text and it's...
It is. This is the kind of mistake I was telling you about. This was a glitch from the changing over into the... And one verse didn't get... Okay, so now, which verse is the real one?
This one is the 13th. Oh, about the Bhagavatam.
So which is 12? Sa esha sadhu charamo bhavanam. Oh yes, see the verses are different.
Yeah.
So we don't have that verse.
Well, the verse is here.
Huh?
The actual verse is here.
On 12?
It says, "Oh, honest one, your present life is the last and supermost."
That's 12.
According to this.
Yes, that's right. Please give it to me. And I have to remind me, make a note and somewhere and remind me that I have to give this to Dravida. Because this is 2018, this is a mistake. Is it OH or O? Is it OH or O? Just O.
So it's missing verse 12?
Yeah. The verse 13 was put into verse 12 by mistake. O honest one, your presence, your present life is the last. I thought it didn't make mistake. It didn't make sense when I started reading the other one, because your present life is the last and supermost. I'd like to speak to the audience out there in cyberspace, what we're doing right now, because this is the kind of mistake that needs to be corrected, and if people have this thing about not correcting mistakes when they should be corrected, it's just a mistake. It's just a mistake to think like that. And if it affects your faith in Prabhupada's books, then you won't be able to hear Prabhupada's books, because you can only hear with full faith and love and without argument. Okay, all honest one, your present life is the last. Now this is text 12 in the actual text according to the Sanskrit, translation of the Sanskrit. Okay, oh honest one, in your present life, your present life is the last, and the supermost. Because in this term of life, you have been awarded my ultimate favor. Now, you can go to my transcendental abode. This is right. Vaikuntha. Oops, now I've got two varieties missing. That means I need a T and a... Do we have Vaikuntha up here? I'll do this later. I'm going to waste time. Remind me to do the diacritics in Vaikuntha in that verse in my database. By leaving this universe, of conditioned souls, of conditioned living entities. Period. Your visit to me in this lonely place because of your pure and unflinching devotional service is a great, then, boon for you. Period. So now let's read this together and see how it makes so much more sense. What's the beginning of the purport of that in your book?
When the person is fully
Yes,
conversant.
that's right. Oh, honest one. So this, now we're going back to to verse 12. So Esha Sado Chadamo Bhavanam Saha, that Eshaha of those, Sadhu, O honest one, Chadama, the ultimate. O honest one, your present life is the last and the supermost, because in this term of life you have been awarded my ultimate favor. Now you can go to my transcendental abode Vaikuntha by leaving this universe of conditioned living entities. Your visit to me in this lonely place, because of your pure unflinching devotional service, is a great boon for you. Purport. When a person is fully conversant with knowledge of the Lord, as far as can be known by a perfect living entity in liberated state, which means even a perfect devotee can't know everything about Krishna, he is allowed to enter into the spiritual sky where the Vaikuntha planets exist. The Lord was sitting in a lonely place, just about to disappear from the vision of the inhabitants of this universe. And Uddhava was fortunate to see him at that time, and thus receive the Lord's permission to enter Vaikuntha. The Lord is everywhere at all times, and his appearance and disappearance are merely the experience of the inhabitants of a particular universe. He is just like the sun. The sun does not appear or disappear in the sky. It is only in the experience of men that in the morning the sun rises, and in the evening the sun sets. The Lord is simultaneously both in Vaikuntha and everywhere within and without Vaikuntha. O Uddhava, this is 13. O Uddhava, in the lotus millennium, in the days of yore, at the beginning of the creation, I spoke unto Brahma, who is situated on the lotus that grows out of my navel, about my transcendental glories, which the great sages describe as Srimad-Bhagavatam. Purport. The explanation of the Supreme Self, as given to Brahma and already explained in the second canto of this great literature, is further clarified herein. The Lord said that the concise form of Srimad-Bhagavatam, as explained to Brahma, was meant to elucidate his personality. The impersonal explanation of those 4 verses in the second canto is nullified herewith. Sridhar Swami also explains in this connection that the same concise form of the Bhagavatam concerned the pastimes of Lord Krishna and was never meant for impersonal indulgence. 14. Uddhava said, O Vidura, when I was thus favored at every moment by the Supreme Personality of Godhead and addressed by him with great affection, my words failed in tears, and the hairs of my body erupted. After smearing my tears, I, with folded hands, spoke like this. O my Lord, devotees who engage in the transcendental loving service of your lotus feet have no difficulty in achieving anything within the realm of the 4 principles of religiosity, economic development, sense gratification and liberation. But, O Great One, as far as I'm concerned, I have preferred only to engage in the lotus feet service of your lotus feet, in the loving service of your lotus feet. Purport. Those who are associated with the Lord in the Vaikuntha planets achieve all the bodily features of the Lord and appear to be the same as Lord Vishnu. Such liberation is called Sarupya Mukti, which is one of the 5 kinds of liberation. The devotees engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord never accept Sayuja Mukti, or merging in the rays of the Lord called the Brahmajyoti. The devotees can achieve not only liberation, but any success in the realm of religiosity, economic development, or sense gratification, up to the standard of the demigods and the heavenly planets. But such a pure devotee as Uddhava refuses to accept any such facilities. A pure devotee wants simply to engage in the service of the Lord and does not consider his own personal benefit. My Lord, even the learned 16. My Lord, even the learned sages become disturbed in their intelligence when they see that your greatness engages in fruitive work, although you are free from all desires, that you take birth, although you are unborn, that you flee out of fear of the enemy, and take shelter in a fort, although you are the controller of invincible time, and that you enjoy household life surrounded by many women, although you enjoy in yourself. Purport. Pure devotees of the Lord are not very much concerned with philosophical speculation in regard to transcendental knowledge of the Lord, nor is it possible to acquire complete knowledge of the Lord. Whatever little knowledge they have about the Lord is sufficient for them, because devotees are simply satisfied in hearing and chanting about the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. This gives them all transcendental bliss. But some of the pastimes of the Lord appear contradictory, even to such pure devotees. And thus Uddhava asked the Lord about some of the contradictory incidents of his pastimes. The Lord is described as having nothing to do personally, but it is actually so, because even in the creation and sustenance of the material world, the Lord has nothing to do. It seems contradictory, then, to hear that the Lord personally lifts the Govardhan hill for the protection of its unalloyed devotees. The Lord is the Supreme Brahman, the Absolute Truth, the personality of Godhead, appearing like a man. But Uddhava had doubts whether he could have so many transcendental activities. There is no difference between the personality of Godhead and the impersonal Brahman. How then can the Lord have many things to do, whereas the impersonal Brahman is stated to have nothing to do, either materially or spiritually? If the Lord is ever unborn, then how is he born as the son of Vasudeva and Devaki? He is fearful even to Kala, the supreme fear, and yet the Lord is afraid of fighting Jarasandha and takes shelter of in a fort. How can one who is full in himself take pleasure in the association of many women? How can he take wives and, just like a householder, take pleasure in the association of family members, children, relatives, and parents? All these apparently contradictory happenings bewilder even the greatest learned scholars, who, thus bewildered, cannot understand whether inactivity is a fact or whether his activities are only imitations. The solution is that the Lord has nothing to do with anything mundane. All his activities are transcendental. This cannot be understood by the mundane speculators. For the mundane speculators, there is certainly a kind of bewilderment. But for the transcendental devotees, there is nothing astonishing in this. The Brahman conception of the Absolute Truth is certainly the negation of all mundane activities, but the Parabrahman conception is full with transcendental activities. One who knows the distinctions between the conception of Brahman and the conception of Supreme Brahman is certainly a real transcendentalist. There is no bewilderment for such transcendentalists. The Lord himself also declares in the Bhagavad Gita, even the great sages and demigods can know hardly anything about my activities and transcendental potencies. The right explanation of the Lord's activities is given by Grandfather Bhishmadev as follows. This is Bhagavatam 1.9.16. Nayasya karichit rajan puman veda viditsitam yad vijigyasya ya yukta muyanti kavayo pihi. O King, no one can know the plan of the Lord, Sri Krishna. Even though great philosophers inquire exhaustively, they are bewildered. Text 17. O my Lord, your eternal self is never divided by the influence of time, and there is no limitation to your perfect knowledge. Thus you were fully able to consult with yourself, yet you called upon me for consultation, as if bewildered, although you were never bewildered, and this act of yours bewilders me. That was when he gave that advice to Krishna about how to kill Jarasandha without going to battle. Purport. Uddhava was never actually bewildered, but he says that all these contradictions appear to be bewildering. The whole discussion between Krishna and Uddhava was meant for the benefit of Maitreya, who was sitting nearby. The Lord used to call Uddhava for consultation when Mathura was attacked by Jarasandha and others, and when the Lord executed great sacrifices as part of his routine royal work as the Lord of Dwarka. The Lord has no past, present, or future, because he is unhampered by the influence of eternal time, and thus nothing is hidden from him. He is eternally self-intelligent. Therefore, his calling upon Uddhava to give him enlightenment is certainly astonishing. All these actions of the Lord appear to be contradictory, although there is no contradiction in the routine activities of the Lord. Therefore, it is better to see them as they are and not attempt to explain them. Hare Krishna. Prabhupada's purports give everything. We don't have to actually go to the other. I mean, we can. Some devotees do, and some devotees like it, and we should also like it. But Prabhupada's purports are enough. I heard Gopi Pradhananda Prabhu once answer this question, about whether or not we should or can or whatever study the previous Acharya's commentaries. And he answered it in a very wonderful way. Because there are places in Prabhupada's purports where he suggests that if a person's serious, that he would do well to go through Jiva Goswami's Sandarbhas and the commentaries of the Bhagavatam by Sanatana Goswami, Toshanatiki and other Tika, and others, Vishwanath and others. But then Gopi said this wonderful thing. He said, so just imagine if a Pandora's box had not been opened to us. He meant that if these translations of these commentaries had not been begun to be translated by ISKCON devotees and without commentaries and come out, and we were just left with Prabhupada's books, would we be able to go back to Godhead? And Prabhupada said yes. In many places he said yes. Even if you just read the Krishna book, Bhagavad Gita, Nectar Devotion, you can go back to Godhead. So that's what it means here when he says, his calling upon Uddhava to give him enlightenment is certainly astonishing. All these actions of the Lord appear to be contradictory, although there is no contradiction in the routine activities of the Lord. Therefore, it is better to see them as they are and not attempt to explain them. So if you just read Prabhupada's purports and accept them as they are, you'll get enough to go back to Godhead. Even though you may follow his instruction in the Bhagavatam, and if they're available and you're qualified, get enlivened by reading the previous Acharya's commentaries. But they are here. This is the point I'm making. That the essence of the previous commentaries of the Acharyas are here in his purports. Enough to take us back to Godhead. And therefore, what was it said up above here? I won't go back and find it, but it said something to the effect that once one knows enough to understand enough about the pastimes of the Lord, he can go back to Godhead. It's not that you have to study all these things in order to be able to go back to Godhead. You just have to know enough according to your capacity to be able to go back to Godhead. And how do you get that? Therefore, it is better to see them as they are and not attempt to explain them. Text 18. My Lord, if you think us competent to receive it, kindly explain to us that transcendental knowledge which gives enlightenment about yourself, which enables one to cross over all afflictions, and which you explained before to Brahmaji. That's the Uddhava Gita. You won't hear the whole Uddhava Gita here. This is just a summary. Purport. A pure devotee like Uddhava has no material afflictions because he engages constantly in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. A devotee feels afflicted without the association of the Lord. Shall I repeat that? A pure devotee like Uddhava has no material afflictions because he engages constantly in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. A devotee feels afflicted without the association of the Lord. Constant remembrance of the Lord's activities keeps the devotee alive. And therefore Uddhava requested that the Lord please enlighten him with the knowledge of Srimad-Bhagavatam as previously instructed to Brahmaji. Text 19. When I thus expressed my heartfelt desires unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the lotus-eyed Lord instructed me about his transcendental situation. That's the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam. Purport. The words paramam stitim are significant in this verse. The Lord's transcendental situation are not even spoken of to Brahma when the 4 verses of Srimad-Bhagavatam 2:9-33-36 were explained. This transcendental situation comprises his dealings with devotees engaged in transcendental loving service, as exhibited in Dwarka and Vrindavan. When the Lord explained his specific transcendental situation, it was meant for Uddhava only, and therefore Uddhava particularly said, Mayam, unto me, although the great sage Maitreya was also sitting there. Such a transcendental situation is hardly understood by those whose devotion is mixed with speculative knowledge or fruitive activities. The Lord's activities in confidential love are very rarely disclosed to the general devotees who are attracted by devotion mixed with knowledge and mysticism. Such activities are the inconceivable pastimes of the Lord. Jai Shri Krishna. Text 20. I have studied the path of understanding self-knowledge from my master, the personality of Godhead, and thus, after circumambulating him, I have come to this place, very much aggrieved due to separation. So see how this seems contradictory, because Krishna said before, now you can go back to Vaikuntha. But in the 12th canto, in 11th canto, it says that he told Uddhava, you can't come with me, because Uddhava asked to come with him. And he said, no, you have to stay here. And you have to go to Badarakashram. Maybe that was in Dwarka. You have to go to Badarakashram. And the reason was because the Lord didn't have time, or he had time, but he didn't. He chose not to go to Badarakashram. He went to all different places in India and visited different qualities of devotees. But he didn't go to Badarakashram. We're very highly elevated, Narada and Vyasadeva, and they're all up there, you know. So he wanted Uddhava to go to them and deliver to them the knowledge of what? Of Braj Bhakti. And why was Uddhava qualified? Because he had sent Uddhava to Braj. And that's why he sent Uddhava to Braj. Because he wanted to see the pure love of the gopis in Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda and all the residents of Braj. So he was a mixture, interesting mixture of Dwarka, bhakti and Braj bhakti. He had both. Purport. Sri Uddhava's actual life is the direct symbol of the Chatushloki Bhagavatam, enunciated first to Brahmaji by the personality of Godhead. These four very great and important verses from Srimad-Bhagavatam are particularly taken out by the Mayavadi speculators, who construe a different purport to suit their impersonal view of monism. Here's the proper answer to such unauthorized speculators. The verses of Srimad-Bhagavatam are purely theistic science, understandable by the postgraduate students of the Bhagavad Gita. The unauthorized, dry speculators are offenders at the lotus feet of the Lord Sri Krishna, because they distort the purports of the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad-Bhagavatam to mislead the public and prepare a direct path to the hell known as Andatamisra. As confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 16:20, such envious speculators are without knowledge, and they are surely condemned life after life. They unnecessarily take shelter of Sripad Shankaracharya, but he was not so drastic as to commit an offense at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. According to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sripad Shankaracharya preached the Mayavad philosophy for a particular purpose. Such philosophy was necessary to defeat the Buddhist philosophy of the non-existence of the spirit soul, but it was never meant for perpetual acceptance. It was an emergency. Thus Lord Krishna was accepted by Shankaracharya as the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his commentation on the Bhagavad Gita. Since he was a great devotee of Lord Krishna, he did not dare write any commentary on Srimad-Bhagavatam, because that would have been a direct offense at the lotus feet of the Lord. But later speculators, in the name of Mayavad philosophy, unnecessarily made their commentary on the Chatushloki Bhagavatam without any bona fide intent. The monistic dry speculators have no business in the Srimad-Bhagavatam, because this particular Vedic literature is forbidden for them by the great author himself. Srila Vyasadeva has definitely forbidden persons engaged in religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and finally salvation from trying to understand Srimad-Bhagavatam, which is not meant for them. 112. Sripad Sridhar Swami, what's that? That's Dharma Kaitavotra Paramo Nirmat Samanam Satam. You can't get it, you can't understand it unless you're free from envy and a devotee, Satam. It is not for them, such unauthorized persons perversely try to understand Srimad-Bhagavatam, and thus they commit offenses at the lotus feet of the Lord, which even Sripad Shankaracharya dared not do. Thus they prepare for their continuation of miserable life. It should be particularly noted herein that Uddhava studied the Chatushloki Bhagavatam directly from the Lord, who first spoke the verses to Brahmaji. And this time the Lord explained more confidentially the self-knowledge mentioned in the previous verse as paramam stitim. Upon learning such self-knowledge of love, Uddhava felt very much grieved by feelings of separation from the Lord. Unless one is awakened to the stage of Uddhava, everlastingly feeling the separation of the Lord in transcendental love, as exhibited by Lord Chaitanya also, one cannot understand the real import of the 4 essential verses of Srimad-Bhagavatam. One should not indulge in the unauthorized act of twisting the meaning and thereby putting himself on the dangerous path of offense. How deep is that? So we're going to stop the reading now, and we'll hear more tomorrow night. Hare Krishna. So now we've come to our relishable reflections and realizations from the Vaishnavas and questions or topics that stuck in the mind and you want to hear more about or you want to say more about. Yes, Bhakta Matt.
I didn't quite understand what a monist is.
A monist is one that accepts that the supreme absolute truth is ultimately without form.
My body.
He's thinking that God's one, and therefore he can't have varieties. Anything with varieties is opposite of one, and therefore the Lord must not have a form. Therefore he must twist the words which describe Krishna's form as being something different than God or the Absolute Truth. Srila Prabhupada, following the footsteps of Jiva Goswami, uses the most simple logic in order to defeat this argument. Because you hear it all the time. It's everywhere now. You're limiting God by saying he has a form. And Prabhupada says, no, you're limiting God because says he can't have a form. Because if he's actually unlimited, he must have a form. And he must also be formless. And that's Lord Chaitanya's philosophy. Achintya Beda Beda Tattva. And it's described particularly the word achintya at the beginning, because it means inconceivable. You may not be able to understand it, you may not be able to speculate and come to this conclusion. But you must accept that Krishna is inconceivable before you can understand that he's one with and different from everything at the same time as the source. Therefore, you only can accept and understand that he has a form and is unlimited. Okay, he doesn't have a form like ours, but he has a form.
I have a reflection.
A reflection from cyberspace,
Radhaji?
from Rati Manjari.
No, Raji Lok.
Oh, that's Radharaman.
Oh.
That's just the name of his. That's the name of his name.
The lock is
Mm-hmm.
the lock is Lokala Maharaj.
Oh yeah, that's his spiritual, his Diksha Guru. Yeah.
He says, these readings are simply wonderful. O Uddhava, in the lotus millennium, in the days of yore, at the beginning of the creation, I spoke unto Brahma, who is situated on the lotus that grows out of my navel, of my transcendental glories, which is the great sages describe as Srimad-Bhagavatam. Wonderful and most significant verse, as you've explained during the reading.
Well, thank you, Radharaman. Keep it up. Keep up the good work. Yes, Priya Kund. Ladies before gentlemen. This is the way it is. That's why they call the better half. Go ahead. Shama Glory.
Vidura was talking about, how bewildering Krishna's qualities and activities are. I was just thinking of one thing that sort of I was thinking of it lately, how to understand that Krishna is described as self-satisfied. He's completely satisfied in himself, yet we never seen him just on his own. So how do we understand?
This is a wonderful question, as usual. She's saying, how do we understand that Krishna is self-satisfied, but we never see him by himself? It's because he's surrounded by his loving devotees who are self-satisfied and yet hankering for him, that he reciprocates with them in such a way as to satisfy them in a way that looks like he is satisfying himself.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That's the answer.
Sorry, Raj, could you repeat that?
He's never alone because the devotees who are self-satisfied are also attracted to him and want to be with him, and therefore he acts in such a way as to appear to be in need of them by associating with them. But in fact, they're both self-satisfied. Therefore, it appears to be bewildering. Because they're expansions of Krishna. All the energies are expansion of Krishna eternally. So it's all one unit. It's all Krishna. And therefore, sometimes Prabhupada would describe how when Krishna is playing with the gopis, it's like he's playing with its reflection in the mirror, like a baby playing with the reflection in the mirror. All these things are done by Yogamaya, actually. Just like, it would just describe the destruction of the Yadu dynasty, which appeared externally to be a disaster, but it wasn't even real. It was arranged by the internal energy to appear to be like that, so that they could be taken back to their original places.
in the Sri Upanishad, the first verse, when
Mm.
it says that
Yes.
the source God is complete, and all the units that are coming out from him, they all complete also.
Yes.
So the jiva is also complete.
Yes.
So and so why are we not experiencing that?
Because we're forgetful of Krishna.
Mm.
We are complete. That's why I said, remember when that girl asked me,
You are perfect.
and I told her, she said, "Why?" And I said, "You're already perfect. You are perfect." And she just, did you see? Her eyes lit up and her face became, and she understood. Oh, you've just forgotten. That's all. It's like Prabhupada always gives the example that the sun creates the cloud, and then the cloud covers the sun. The sun is never covered. Only the vision of the persons on the ground is covered, because the cloud can't cover the sun. The sun's millions of miles across. But it can come because we're tiny. Because we're very tiny, we can be covered. A little cloud can cover the vision of the sun. So the whole material cosmic manifestation is like a little cloud in the corner of the spiritual sky. And the souls who are in here are covered by that cloud of material energy. And it's interesting, I heard Gopi Purandana explaining this in a very nice way, and that is that we shouldn't forget that we are the ones that chose to be here. Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita it says that the distress and happiness of living beings are created by themselves. They're the ones that create that. The Lord creates the material world in order to fulfill the desires of the souls to be, separate from Him. So if we can't blame Krishna, He's trying to help us come back to Him. We decide. So if we don't take responsibility, then we will concoct philosophies that end up in one way or another blaming Him or trying to, destroy Him, actually, in some cases. And to understand this is not possible unless you become a devotee of the Lord who is willing to accept from Krishna and from the persons who have accepted from Krishna without changing it. And you have to accept it. There's no other way to get this knowledge. You can't figure it out for yourself. And therefore those persons who are speculating and trying to figure out for themselves, they just get farther and farther away. Just like the mirage, the animal going to the mirage of water in a desert, it just keeps going farther and farther away. They run toward it, seeing that it doesn't mean that the water doesn't exist. Water exists, but it exists somewhere else. They're real. The sun is real that's reflecting to cause the water. Water exists, only it's somewhere else. The illusion is thinking that the water is there. So the souls are here in the material world thinking that the pleasure is here in the interaction of the material energy, which is not. And I don't remember who it was who first used this analogy. I don't remember whether it was coming from Prabhupada or a realization of a devotee, but he's told the story of a man who lost his keys to his car, and it was an emergency because he had to go to a very important appointment. So he was on the ground looking for his keys, and his friend came along and said, "What happened? I lost my keys and I have to be at this appointment and my whole life depends on it." And he said, "Well, do you remember where you lost it or where you last saw it?" It was about 500 yards down that way. I said, "So why are you over here?" He said, "Well, there's no lamp post over here. Here there's a lamp post, so I figured it would be." That's exactly what we're doing. We're looking in the wrong place, that's all. And Krishna is so kind that he comes into the material world, not for any need that he has, and that's why he's self-sufficient, but he comes to help us come back to him, because that's what he wants. He feels incomplete without us. He's not incomplete. But he feels incomplete without us. Why? Because he knows that we can't be satisfied without him. So his satisfaction is only dependent on us not being happy. Not that he is not happy. Once, when Krishna came to Radharani as a goddess, this is Prem Samputa by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And Krishna came to this as a goddess. And when Krishna dresses up, it's not that he just, puts on a sari and he looks like Krishna. He changes his whole form. And he looked like the most beautiful, gorgeous. And he came and Radharani saw him and said, immediately she was attracted. She was so beautiful, and all the gopis were attracted. And he bewildered them all, and he started, she said, "Oh, can you be my friend?" And he didn't speak. And so she started to try to get her to speak. And she just wouldn't speak. And she was speculating, "Oh, did you have some problem with your lover?" And all these things. I have the same problem sometimes. Krishna's over there, in ecstasy, of course. And then, at one point, finally Krishna starts to speak. And he said, yes. He said, actually I'm a goddess, and I was in the heavenly planets, and I heard this sound, and there were conflicting sounds, and I decided to come here and find out what it was. And I heard this beautiful flute, and then I heard this crying, and I came over here and I saw you, and then this Krishna is playing his flute, and he's going with another girl, and you're crying, and then I began to think, why is she attracted to this rascal? This Debachi who's pretending he's attracted to you, and he's with another girl. And Radharani says, "You don't understand anything, do you?" He said, "Actually, I'm crying because I know that Krishna can only be happy with me, and when some of my friends or whoever distract him, he's suffering because he's not with me. So I'm crying because Krishna's suffering." And by this time, Krishna's he can barely contain himself, And they said, "Well, really? So, how does that work?" And he said, "Well, because Krishna and I are the same soul." And then Krishna says, "Well, if you're the same soul, then you must be able to call him whenever you want." Oh, he says, "Oh, yes, I can call him whenever I want." And then she sat down like an innocent village girl in meditation and started. By this time, Krishna lost it completely. He couldn't keep his form, and he changed into his form of Krishna. And then she opened her eyes and says, "Oh, you came? Just see. Where's the goddess? Where's that goddess?" And Krishna, she went this way. She went over. I don't know. She went over there. So, Krishna, he's self-satisfied. Even though it appears he needs others for satisfaction, but it's not like that. And you can't understand it with your brain. You can't understand it by figuring it out. It's not possible. You can only hear it, and if you're pure-hearted enough, accept it. And you can only do that if you accept that Krishna is inconceivable and can do anything. And the logicians, they think this is just a circular reasoning that's used by a devotee to answer any question. And therefore they can't understand. No matter how much you argue, they can't understand. But when a devotee hears it, they become very happy. Okay, we're going to stop there. It's after 8 o'clock. Thank you all for... I told you this was the cream of the crop because some wonderful things came out tonight that, by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada's purports, things that are impossible to understand become possible to understand in Prabhupada's association. That's a fact. And you can't discuss these things in just anybody's association. That's a fact also. So thank you all very much for empowering me, and thank everyone out in cyberspace. And don't forget that caring means sharing, and sharing means caring. So keep sharing with your friends that this is going on every night. It may be the only place it's going on every night like this. Just reading Prabhupada's books every single night. Maybe it's going on, but I don't know of any other place where this is going on every single night. And because we're doing this and we're going to continue to do this, and we've been doing it for a long time, things are starting to come out so nicely, by Prabhupada's mercy. Everything is in Prabhupada's books. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Gaur Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna.